Good morning, everyone. My name is Toni Harris. I'm the Assistant Dean for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. And I wanted to welcome all of you and go over just a few housekeeping items before we get started today. I want to make sure everyone's aware that we have coffee and hot chocolate tea back here in the corner. They'll be replenishing that throughout the day, so you're welcome to come back until after, well, actually I just fibbed to you. Until after Director Botticelli speaks. At that point, the next thing I need to tell you is we're going to close the ballroom until just before lunch is served so that our amazing dining services folks can come in and reset everything and make it nice for you for lunch. Okay, so we ask that you not come into the ballroom in between times. Also, the restroom facilities are right across the hall for those of you who may not have found those yet. Just right across the hall, also on the second floor at the very, very end of the hall, past all of the 206 rooms, which may not mean anything to you now, but once you get upstairs it will. At the very end of the hall are the restrooms. Also, in your participant bags, you're going to find feedback forms. For those of you who have purchased CEU credits, those are required before we can give you your CEU form. That's a requirement that the different accrediting agencies have asked us for. For the rest of you who have not purchased CEU credits, we would still love to have your feedback. Please help us make this conference better for you as we keep going and looking forward to next year. Also, if you have any questions, please find any of us at the registration area. You all also have in your participant bags a schedule for today. There is an exhibit fair at noon for those of you who haven't had a chance to go through all the exhibits. And without further ado, I wanted to introduce to you our Dean for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, David Yells, who will introduce to you our keynote speaker.
Good morning and welcome. My name is David Yells, and I'm the Dean of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences here at Utah Valley University, and I also direct our substance use disorder counseling program. Before I go any further, I want to acknowledge the work of Toni in organizing today's conference. She spends, as soon as we're done today, she's going to start working on next year's conference. So she puts a lot of time into this and does a wonderful job along with other members of our office staff. So for Toni and the group that helped put this together. We hope you enjoy your experience with us today and encourage you to let us know if you have any questions or concerns. Today we are pleased to present the 4th annual Utah Valley University Conference on Addiction. Our presenters consist of professionals, community, national, and state service providers and educators. We believe that you will find their insights both helpful and informative. We are joined by several sponsors who have helped us make this conference available to you. We would like to thank the Utah Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, Utah County Department of Drug and Alcohol Prevention and Treatment, STEPS Recovery Center, Mountain West ATTC, IHC Dayspring, Odyssey House, and Next Step Medical Detox. Without our sponsors, we would not be able to bring this conference to you. Please help me to thank them. Don't forget to take the opportunity to visit the exhibitor fair located in the Commons area. Each of our sponsors, as well as other community resources joining us, have valuable information to share at their booths. There will be dedicated time allocated from noon until 12:30 for you to spend time visiting these exhibits. Philip Seymour Hoffman, Corey Monteith, Whitney Houston, Amy Winehouse, Heath Ledger, Chris Farley, Len Bias, John Belushi, some of the famous faces of addiction and drug overdose. The numbers continue to go up at an alarming rate. Today, 1 in 4 deaths are attributed to drug-related problems. It's the #1 preventable cause of death in the United States today. The number of drug-related deaths in this country has doubled since the 1980s. That's why we're here today, to help make a difference. It's my pleasure to introduce to you today our opening keynote speaker, Jim Contopulos. Jim has been married to Belinda for 36 years and is the father of 2 children, Vanessa, age 33, who is now married to Michael Fryer, and Nick, who passed away at age 26 after a 13-year struggle to find long-term, affordable, quality recovery. Jim worked as a professional in the insurance industry for over 30 years, but what he was called to do was to be a father to both Nick and Vanessa. It is this which has defined his life. His film tribute to his son, Beautiful Boy, More Than an Addict, presents a father's lament upon losing his beautiful son to addiction and mental illness. Jim has requested that we first share his film with you, and then he will speak with us. So please enjoy this screening of Beautiful Boy, More Than an Addict.
Hello, my name is Jim Contopulos. On May 29th of 2010, we lost our 26-year-old son, Nick, after a 13-year battle to find long-term, affordable, quality recovery and care from mental illness and addiction. The film you're about to see will pay honor to this journey into exile that both Nick and the many other Nicks must travel daily in order to find their recovery. The late Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "True compassion is more than throwing a coin to a beggar. It requires of our humanity that if we live in a society that produces beggars, we are morally commanded to restructure that society." For this reason, I dream of a better day for those afflicted with this unrelenting disease. Join with me on a journey of change, and for now, on a walk with my beautiful boy and my friend. Thank you.
When the breeze is behind the trees, I remember what you mean to me. I'm getting by, I suppose. When the green is in the grass, I can recall how you made me laugh. I'm getting by, I suppose. Beautiful boy, what do you see now that you're free? We're still here, we need you near. When the twilight calls to me, I can recall how you used to be. I'm getting by, I suppose. Beautiful boy, what do
It's quiet here, Nick, here in the plateau where we walk so often. Even our home is quiet now, at times too quiet, removed from the drama, the insanity of the diseases that consumed your young life and those of us who loved you. You've been gone from us for just 1 year, and there is not a day or an hour that I don't think of you. Even now, I imagine you and I walking through these hills, alive with color, feeling the wind on our faces as it bends the grass. But you are gone, your own season of spring ending too soon. Many times your mom, your sister, and I would pray that God would heal you from your diseases. We imagined that nothing could be more painful than watching you suffer the torment, the stigma, and the loneliness your diseases brought. You would find peace on this plateau, Nick, like you did so often, and yet it was a fragile peace, so elusive for you, especially these past years, as your dual diagnosis of mental illness and addiction progressed. While I know that your death has brought your final healing, we are left trying to move forward in order to honor the courageous and honorable work of recovery that we witnessed firsthand, left with trying to help the many other Nicks who will travel this same path while we grieve the loss of our beautiful boy, the one with the sweetest of hearts. And now, 1 year after your death, I still ask myself what monster consumed the life of this beautiful boy. The boy who struggled for his words on stage, the same boy who struggled to find his place amongst his peers at sports. The boy whose limitless imagination brought plastic army men and cowboys to life for hours. The same boy who would spend weeks perfecting his magic tricks. You will always be my beautiful boy. This beautiful boy who adored his sister, his daughter, and who reserved a special place in his heart for his mother. This boy who loved his dogs, his cats, and his friends. Where did we lose you? Where did you go? What door had been unknowingly opened by you that could now never be closed? These drugs that at one time had brought you such relief had now been forged into your own personal ball and chain. These same drugs have become your oxygen, your means for survival. How hard you tried to find recovery. At multiple inpatient recovery locations too numerous to count, you earned recovery's reward of self-respect, and how you loved it. But your diseases don't relent. They seduce. They wait. They lie. They whisper, one more time. This time it will be different. These diseases that demanded all of our attention and consumed all our lives. These diseases that gave you a death of 1,000 cuts. At times we were envious of those with diseases that affected only the body. These individuals were cared for with the best our society has to offer in order to provide the greatest opportunity for recovery. Not so with you and your diseases. In time, we came to learn that the very best we could do for you was to find our own way into our own recovery. Nick, recovery is not about a bad person becoming good. It is about a sick person becoming well. You were sick, terribly sick, and yet oftentimes we treated you as if you were bad. Nick, you deserve better from us. In the end, you were left alone, straining to navigate a fragmented, haphazard system of care as your disease progressed. A health system drained of quality resources. A justice system refusing to listen to the medical advice of those who have done the work, forgone the research, while we continue to criminalize our sick and build more prisons. A system where desperation is taken advantage of by costly, seemingly quick, yet ineffective promises. A system lacking. Alone and misunderstood, having to weather the storm of these terrible diseases, even those rare opportunities for long-term, affordable addiction recovery. Even those were close to you because of your dual diagnosis. How inadequate, misspent, and misdirected were our resources for you and for the many other Nicks. Slowly, Nick, very slowly, we came to understand that there is no formula for recovery. Looking back now, we recognize the common ingredients of communities that affected true change for not only sobriety but long-term recovery. We need more. Communities that see the addict and the mentally ill as patients, not problems. Facilities that are able to treat these diseases concurrently. Communities that are built upon humanity, not humiliation, that encourage mutual respect, meaningful work, and purpose. Communities that afford the individual with the necessary time in order to restructure long-held habits. Communities that encourage honesty and openness. Communities that see beyond addictive actions labeled as bad and envision the value of the individual, the value in his recovery. We need to grow communities to become a culture of inclusiveness and whole being. Nick, as you know, communities such as these are extremely rare, but I hope for a better day. A day seated by the pain and loss of losing such beautiful boys as yourself. A day when the words of a cancer treatment facility, care that never quits, becomes the words of those who care for the addicted and the mentally ill. Until that better day, I will grieve the loss of you. What a great gift I have been given to have witnessed your courageous and honorable work of recovery, and how proud I am of you. You have left a large handprint on my heart, and I am changed, forever changed. Nick, there are times now late in the afternoon when the shadows are long and I can sense your presence even greater, that I am closer. It's at these times that I recall the final scene from the movie Gladiator, a movie you and I both loved. The scene when the warrior Maximus has been killed. In his death, he is shown moving over the beautiful hills so familiar to him, alive with tall grasses as they touch his outstretched arms. He comes toward a gate, and as it opens to him, his son and wife, who have previously died, run to meet him, and you realize he is now at home. He has returned to that which he loved the most. On that day, I will see you again, full of life, clothed in light, and I will hear again from you, "Hi, Dad." And then I too will be home.
Keep a fire for the human race. Let your prayers go drifting into space. You never know what will be coming down. Perhaps a bitter world is drawing near. Just as easily it could all disappear, along with whatever meaning you might have found. Don't let the uncertainty turn you around. Go on and make a joyful sound into a dancer you have grown from a seed somebody else has thrown. Go on ahead and throw some seeds of your own, and somewhere between the time you were right and the time you go, may lie a reason you grew alive that you'll never know.
Good morning. First, let me say thank you to Tony Harris for her hospitality. I couldn't have met a kinder, sweeter person than Tony, and helpful. Also, thank you to the Utah Valley University, the Humanities and Social Sciences Department for hosting this conference regarding addiction. The irony that Nick's dad would be your keynote speaker would not be lost on Nick, who had a playful sense of humor. As you might imagine, for several reasons, I wish I weren't qualified to speak. This is not the path that I would have chosen, but it is the path that I must walk. It is said, and I believe it to be true, that the primary ingredient of recovery is humility. And so it is with a profound sense of humility that I address you this morning, because I am not an academic, I am not a researcher, I am not a practitioner or a policymaker, I'm not even a student in the field of addiction and mental illness. I am a father. And it is from this vantage point that I address you. I am as well a Christian. And it is from my understanding of the humanity of Jesus, that luminous Nazarene, in the words of Albert Einstein, and the God that he revealed, that I address you. I am also a person who has lived and known the beauty of recovery for these past 8 years. It is from these vantage points that I speak to you. I am the father of 2 beautiful children. One who lives near to us and is using her gifts, education, talents, and lived experience to bring forth that better day. The other is Nick, my beautiful boy, who died at the age of 26, a young boy full of promise and hope, who opened a door that he alone could never fully close. Unknowingly, Nick had entered a room that he could never fully leave, despite more than a decade of courageous and honorable work. During his brief life, Nick was in over 20 inpatient drug and alcohol treatment programs, admitted over 70 times to our local mental health emergency facility, attended every local hospital's emergency room many times, and lived in numerous so-called sober living facilities and at times on the streets. It was during these long and painful years that I came to realize that we have no cure or no formula for recovery. And while there may be no cure or formula, I do believe there are what I would call ingredients that are found in those rare instances of successful recovery for both the individual who suffers and for those who love them. When Nick died nearly now 4 years ago, my world was shattered. Living with, loving, and then losing Nick completely altered my life. I had no idea at the time how I could continue on. All deaths are hard, but the death of a child is the hardest death of all. In the weeks following Nick's death, I recalled a conversation I had once heard on CNN after Hurricane Katrina. The interviewer was inquiring of a lady who had suffered enormous loss during the hurricane, how she was now able to continue on and help others. She replied very simply, at some point, I stopped asking why me and began asking, what now? That simple answer lodged itself deep into my heart. And it is why today I stand before you to ask, what now? What now for the many other Nicks who will crowd our shadows? Will they be left as we were, with a fatal absence of hope? Will they face the daunting task, as we did, of navigating our society's haphazard, fragmented system of care? What now for those other Nicks who will open these same doors? Will they see our society continue to criminalize our sick and drain our cities, counties, and states of valuable resources that could possibly be used for innovative research and long-term, affordable, quality care? Or will they experience a more humane and informed approach, in my opinion, towards this chronic yet treatable disease, an approach that follows the advice given by Dr. Nora Volkow, the director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse, who sees in the law an extraordinary opportunity to direct care? What now for those other NICs who must live with a toxic, tormenting sense of shame, hopelessness, humiliation, and despair? What now for the millions who work silently each day to hold on to recovery's promise? Will they continue to suffer the shame and stigma and silence of stigma, or will they see a better day of increased understanding and empathy for their mental illness and their addiction? What now for those who love and care for those who suffer and have learned to live with a radical alteration of expectations? Will they find pathways of promise and sanctuaries of hope? What now for the estimated 70 to 90% of individuals who suffer with a co-occurring disorder of mental illness and addiction, such as Nick? Will they see that better day when we treat these diseases concurrently? Or will we continue to silo our care and compromise our effectiveness? Will those who suffer and those who love them see a time when this country follows the advice given now nearly 20 years ago by Walter Cronkite to find a middle ground and to assemble, quote, a blue ribbon bipartisan national commission to reappraise our drug policy right down to its very core, unquote? I don't like to think of the research that could have been funded, the early education and quality prevention that could have been implemented, the hope restored and the lives saved, had we perhaps found that middle ground of informed dialogue. The question of what now is what compelled me to tell Nick's story in film. I knew that in telling Nick's story that I was also telling the story of tens of thousands of other Nicks who have died trying to reach for their own recovery despite the overwhelming odds against them. I knew also that I would be speaking for the hundreds of thousands of family members who have faced the devastation these diseases leave in their wake. I knew also that in describing Nick's struggle for recovery, that I was, in some sense, honoring the courageous struggle of millions of individuals now in recovery for addiction and mental illness, that perhaps I could shed some light on this oftentimes unnoticed, unappreciated, and unvalued work. I hope I have done that. Nick and the many other Nicks deserve nothing less. 1 year after Nick's death, my friend and pastor said to me that he knew that the wheels had come off at our house, but during those years he had absolutely no idea how to understand what was happening to us or Nick, nor how to help. His honest admission, I believe, represents the vast majority of our society. There can be, to me, no other reason why otherwise good and caring people would allow so many to die with their efforts unnoticed and unappreciated. I refuse to accept that I live in a society that might mirror the attitude reflected in the quote attributed to Joseph Stalin, that while the death of an individual is tragic, the death of a million is a statistic. But in truth, hundreds of thousands are dying, and if not dying, are struggling daily to find their own long-term, affordable, quality recovery and care for these illnesses. In just these past several weeks, I have once again spoke at the memorial for a 26-year-old boy who overdosed. And then within days of that event, I heard from another friend who lost her second son to addiction. Father Greg Boyle of Homeboy Industries in Los Angeles has for 25 years worked with the addicted, the homeless, and dying of Los Angeles. Recently, he told the story of when he and his friend Jose, one of his self-described homeboys, were invited to speak to a conference of social workers. Unbeknownst to Father Boyle, as Jose began to speak, he told his own story of being beaten as a child. So bad was the beating by Jose's mother that for most of Jose's young life, he learned to wear 3 T-shirts to school in order to hide the blood and the welts that he received at the hands of his mother. Now, however, Jose says, I caress my wounds. I run my hands over them and honor them, because apart from these wounds, how could I help the wounded if I don't welcome my wounds? And so it is with me this day. In a book that likely saved my life, Lament for a Son, the author, Nicholas Wolterstorff, who lost his own son at age 25, says that if sympathy for the world's wounds is not enlarged by our anguish, if love for those around us is not expanded, if gratitude for what is good does not flame up, if insight is not deepened, if commitment to what is important is not strengthened, if aching for a new day is not intensified, if hope is weakened and faith diminished, if from the experience of death comes nothing good, then death is won, then death be proud. But we who survive must not allow that to happen. Change we must, both individually, in our communities, and in our society. As a result of the conversation with my former pastor, I began to build community service conferences addressing the issues of mental illness and addiction in our faith communities. As we were struggling with what to name these conferences and how to frame these discussions, my son-in-law introduced me to a Japanese method of pottery art titled kintsugi. The history of kintsugi dates back to the 15th century when a Japanese shogun was gifted a priceless vase. The vase, however, had broken in transit. The Japanese shogun returned the vase for repair, but what came back was a clumsily repaired effort, similar perhaps to how we now care for our addicted and mentally ill. Finally, however, his own artisans were able to devise a method of repair using plant resin and gold flakes placed into those broken seams. Now this kintsugi pottery is a piece of even greater beauty because of its perceived intrinsic value and the great care and skill provided in service to its fragile beauty. From that metaphor and from my personal understanding of recovery and the brokenness that is my life, we titled our conferences Seams of Gold. For at its core, kintsugi requires of us to see beauty in that which is broken. The wounds and the brokenness of the mentally ill and the addicted are perhaps the most visible, but I have come to understand that all of us, regardless of station in life, carry brokenness, that in the end there is no us and them, it is we. And while I, like you, love advancing technology, sound science, quality medicine properly applied, I have come to now believe that perhaps we must begin to look elsewhere in order to answer the question of how we have come to this place of our common tragedy, that this proverbial canary in the coal mine says something very tragic about how we express our common humanity. For me, I must now look to the poets, philosophers, songwriters, visionaries, storytellers, to remind me of the beauty in our common humanity. For it is beauty that inspires, that restores, that heals, and informs us of the path towards a better day. That all of us, including our sick, are much greater than our biographies. With that mindset before us, let me read this poem by the late Irish poet and philosopher John O'Donohue, titled For an Addict. On its way through the innocent night, the moth is ambushed by the light. becomes glued to a window where a candle burns, its whole self, its dreams of flight, and all desire trapped in one glazed gaze. Now nothing else can satisfy but the deadly beauty of the flame. When you lose the feel for all other belonging, and what is truly near becomes distant and ghostly, you're visited and claimed by a simplicity sinister in its singularity. No longer yourself, your mind will be owned and steered from somewhere else now. You will sacrifice anything to dance once more with your fatal beloved who owns the eyes to your heart. These words of blessing cannot reach you, even as echoes, to the shore of where you are. Yet may they walk without you to soften some slight line, through to the white cave where your soul is captive. May some glimmer of outside light reach your eyes to help you recognize how you have fallen for a vampire. May you crash hard and soon onto Rio ground again, where this fundamentalist shell might start to crack, for you to hear again your own echo, that your lost, lonesome heart might learn to cry out for the true intimacy of love that waits to take you home, to where you are known and seen, and where your life is treasured beyond every frontier of despair you have crossed. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, in regards to the civil rights struggle and the need to change existing laws, that ultimately the real goal is to awaken a sense of shame within the oppressor, that the end is reconciliation, the end is redemption, the end is the creation of the beloved community. May you and I be fortunate enough to see that better day when those around us who suffer so greatly are embraced in the beloved community that we build. For they are our sons and daughters, our fathers and mothers, our brothers and sisters. They are us, and we are them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, for that wonderful story and ideas. Would you be willing to take some questions? Okay. Any questions for Jim? Give him a chance. Okay. Sir.
Yes, thank you. I do see it as common ingredients now. I see humility, I see integrity, I see humanity, I see respect, I see opportunity and purpose in those places that really offer long-term recovery. Regretfully, those are hard to come by in many places that address mental illness and addiction. One of my favorite places is a place called Delancey Street, based out of San Francisco, but they have 4 or 5 others across the United States. And San Patrignano in Italy is an incredible place. And they're not alone, but what happens there is something special. People get their lives back. It's just not sobriety. It's more than sobriety. It's truly a life recovered. Yes. Yeah, she asked what the role NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, has in regards to this. NAMI is, like I mentioned, a national organization to address mental illness. They have state and local chapters. They have a wonderful chapter in our area, and I've been through their family-to-family program twice because it takes a long time for things to get into my head. And once they get in, they don't go out. Quite honestly, I wish NAMI had a stronger role in playing to addressing the co-occurring incidents. There is such a high percentage. It ranges between what I've heard, the low of 50% to the high of 90% of individuals who carry a co-occurring disorder. And yet we continue to address these issues separately, probably because of funding. I have spoken to and not met with, but by phone and emailed the president at one time. He's no longer there with NAMI. And I said, I wish you could spend more time in your family-to-family course talking about co-occurring disorders. Sometimes there's conflicting messages, quite honestly. I love NAMI, what they're doing to try to reduce stigma and to support families. But they disappoint me in some regards, too. But so does the Department of Mental Illness in my county. We've got a substance abuse side, and we have a mental illness side. And they don't even know they hardly exist. That's starting to change. With the Affordable Care Act, things are changing. And so, yeah, that's my take on NAMI. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am? Yes, ma'am? No. There's a gentleman by the name of David Sheff who wrote a book called Beautiful Boy, and it was a huge, impactful book for me and Nick. Nick loved it. And you can see I took part of the title of the film is from his book. And I know David, and he's a wonderful guy, but he did not lose his son to addiction. Nick Sheff, that I know of, is in recovery, long-term recovery now. Yes, that's a good point. I didn't bring any videos because I was born with a small brain. I probably should have. But if you give me an email, I can either send you a copy of the DVD if you'd like to show it, or if you just want to, I can email you a link to the film on YouTube. Either way is fine with me. I have DVDs at home. And be glad to mail one out to you if you'd like, if you give me an address or email. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the book that I mentioned, and going through the grief of losing a child is something I'd never, ever, because Nick overdosed multiple times, I guess we thought we had kind of fortressed ourselves against the eventuality, but it was devastating. It was just devastating to lose him. And I had lost my parents and lost other family members, etc. But nothing is like losing a child, nothing. And that book, Lament for a Son, I truly mean, really did, I think, save my life. It's a beautiful book. It's available on Amazon. It's a gorgeous book. Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I love that. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Well, the question is regarding kintsugi pottery, the art of kintsugi pottery. I was introduced to that, as I mentioned, by my son-in-law, whose family lived in Japan at one time, and his sister introduced kintsugi art, pottery art, to him. And I was talking to Michael, my son-in-law, about the conference we were trying to put on, and my understanding of recovery and brokenness, and truly from a Christian standpoint, how God works his way into those places of brokenness, I believe, much more powerfully than he does in our capabilities. He works with our availability, but this is not a church. And he introduced me. He went online and he had remembered something about kintsugi pottery. And the story truly is that it was broken. It was gifted, broken, priceless vase. They couldn't repair it well. They eventually learned how to repair it by using plant resin and gold flakes into those broken seams. And when I saw that, I thought, this is the story of recovery. This is our lives. This is the brokenness that is our lives. And so I knew that metaphor would help me to describe the beauty that I see in recovery, because it's a remarkable thing that takes place in a recovered life. And I promote it everywhere I can. I'll continue to live in it, continue to go to my recovery group, I suspect, for the remainder of my life. And I believe without a doubt, of all the things we tried to do for Nick, the best thing we did was my wife and I getting into our own recovery, without a doubt. Does that help answer that? You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry, one more. Well, and that's the question is, if I had one suggestion for mental health care providers. My wife works at a mental health clinic in the county of Riverside, where we live, at the Paris Mental Health Clinic. And there's some remarkable changes taking place, at least in Riverside County, and I think spreading throughout California, because we passed what's called the Prop 109, the Mental Health Services Act. So there's money. What I think, there needs to be more a confluence of addressing mental illness and addiction concurrently. And I think it's coming. I think there is change underway with the Affordable Care Act. I know it's coming. And sometimes I look at what's happening with us right now with the number of people dying, Nick, mental illness, the hospitals that emptied their beds, and the communities that weren't ready to take those individuals, and we step over them on the streets. And I look at it similar to the AIDS crisis that took place in the 80s, when we knew people were dying and felt helpless. And probably the closest friend of mine in life died from HIV/AIDS. And something happened when we started to feel differently about these individuals who carried these diagnoses of HIV. Something changed, and I think some of that was with the on the national lawn, when they had the AIDS quilt and the Faces project. I don't know how to build empathy into people. Really, telling Nick's story is my best way, because a single story is powerful, but when you start to deal with the huge numbers of people dying, it's overwhelming, and it can't be overwhelming. You guys are on the front lines. You are on the front lines of doing good work. So I don't know that I have one specific thing other than to remember Nick. You know, when you're caring for people, remember Nick. He would love that. Thank you.